Review Session 8, Game Theory. Okay, we know that game theory, and I would write this down, comes from the oligopoly market where firms are interdependent. So they have to consider each other's actions. So the first thing here, what's the prisoner's dilemma? You want to write this down. Non-collusive, that means they don't work together. Model of pricing. Non-collusive model of pricing where firms must predict other firms' pricing. So you can write also rival game where two rivals achieve, write this down, two rivals achieve a less desirable outcome because they cannot coordinate their strategies. You're going to see that here in a payoff matrix where if the AP test will say, what would they do if they could collude? And you would choose a certain strategy for both. But we know that the game theory means there's not a collusion agreement here, so they're going to get a less desirable income, and they have to hedge their bets and say, well, what is my opponent going to do? The reason it comes with the name prisoner's dilemma is because they do this idea that if you have two people committed a crime and you had them separately in holding cells, and you could set up this diagram that, they say if you confess, you get 5 years. And you think, well, if neither of us confess, we get 0 years. But if he does and I don't, I get 20 years. But if I do, I only get 5. So I can either gamble with 0 and not confess, but then I could end up with 20 years if he confesses. Or I can just go ahead, suck it up, take the 5. And that's usually what they'll end up doing because the worst case scenario of 20 is much worse than the 5. So it's called a prisoner's dilemma because you're going to get a less than desirable income. The outcome would be 0. But because the risk is too great, they're going to go with the 5. Okay, the next question there, what is a dominant strategy? Write this down. A strategy that is always the best strategy to pursue regardless of what a rival is doing. Say that again. Strategy that is always the best strategy regardless of what the rival does. I would also write next to that this statement. We don't have to write down this whole statement, but when an AP test asks you a question about game theory, the first step you always want to do is see if any firm has a dominant strategy. That's the first thing you should do when you get a payoff matrix. Does anyone have a dominant strategy? Then answer questions after that, but always look first for a dominant strategy. Let's go through some example problems. This is an example problem the AP test could give you. They'll give you this matrix. Gas stations X and Y, they have the choice between high and low pricing. They have to consider, well, what will my opponent do? So you look at this and you say, that first question says, what strategy would both stations love to do? Well, obviously, if they had to come to an agreement, they would come to both pricing high, 2000, 2000. You might say, well, wait, station X could get more if it priced low and Y priced high, but price Y or station Y would never agree to that because then they would only get 500. So if Y knew that X was going to go low, so point to that. Point to where X would go low. Go to price low, that little blue box, and the 2 boxes under it. Either could happen if X goes low. Well, if they do that and price Y or station Y looks at it, they say, great, I am going to go low too. And that ends up putting you in the 1,000 box. Now, if they're colluding, they would both love to price high. Okay, but what do they need to keep in mind? You want to write each other's actions. You don't know what's going to happen, what the other person's going to do. So what will the ultimate non-collusion combination be? So now write these steps. First, look for a dominant strategy. Let's just go to X. Okay, point on the screen to where it says station X. Point on those words. Now, if they price high, point to the blue box that says price high for station X. If they price high, they're either going to end up with $2,000, point your pen to it, take your finger, and then point to the one below it, at station X getting 500. So they're either going to get 2,000 or 500, or they could price low. Switch that pen over to the right with your finger. Now, if they price low, they would either get 3,000 or 1,000. Well, what's the more desirable combination? Obviously pricing low. So they have a dominant strategy. They're going to price low no matter what station Y decides to do. So when they price low, they're either going to be one of 2 boxes. Point to those 2 boxes. Which one they are in depends on what the other person's going to do. Well, station Y looks at this and says, Obviously, Station X is going to price low. What's going to be my best option? They are going to say 500,000, I want 1,000. So they're going to price low, which leads us to our sort of equilibrium box. Where are we going to end up? Both pricing low. So the ultimate combination would be both pricing low, each one gaining $1,000. What could change this? That next question, if they colluded. You could have gone the alternate route and say, okay, let's start with station Y. Let's say, so point to station Y with your pen. Let's now point to pricing high. Okay, the little light blue box. So station Y, if they priced high, they're either going to get 2,000 or 500. Okay, then you go to the price low, 3,000 or 1,000. They also have a dominant strategy. So X and Y both have the dominant strategy of going low. You're not always going to have both firms with the dominant strategy. If one firm has a dominant strategy, then the other firm says, I know what you're going to do no matter what, so I'll make my choice accordingly. Okay, let's go over this second example here. An example of a possible multiple choice question that you would get. So they give you the scenario for firm X and Y, and the choices are, should you advertise, or status quo means not advertise. So your multiple choice question. If these firms do not collude, the outcome will be, okay, well, we have to figure this out. Let's just, for the sake of fun, say if they could collude, what would they choose? Right, they would both choose status quo, 5 and 5 million. So it says 4.5, 1, 6. These are all in terms of millions. So if they could collude, it would be status quo for both. But they don't say that in the question. They want to know what's going to happen if they don't collude. So what's the first thing we have to do? Hopefully you said look for a dominant strategy. Point to firm X. Okay, I have my pen pointed to firm X. I'm actually doing that. Now point to the blue box where it says advertise for firm X. So firm X is either going to get 4.5 or $6 million. Go to status quo, 1 or 5. What's the more desirable combination? Obviously for them to advertise. So you know that they're going to be located in that position. If they're going to advertise, then we look at firm Y. Firm Y can either get 4.5 or 1 million. Well, the desirable there is advertising. So X advertises, and because of that, firm Y advertises, and that means that both firms are going to advertise. So your answer for that question is going to be B. Both firms advertise. Last example here that I'm going to do with you, and then you can go on to your own practice problems because you have the answer key. 2 mines here, B mine and G mine. For I think gold. Now they'll tell you in the AP question here, they tell you that the first entry is B mine. So what I would do right now on your paper, the first entry in each of the 4 boxes, the $10 in the first one, write B above it, 25 B, 5 B, 20 B. So the first number in each box, put a B above it so you know who's this whose, and you can do the G's for the other ones if you want. So look for dominant strategies. Start with G mine. If they cheat, they're either going to get, so G mine, second entries point to G mine, then point to cheat, and then the 2 numbers that they could get if they cheated, either 5 or 15. Now move your finger and pen over. Not cheat, either 20 or 25. Okay, their dominant strategy is to not cheat. Okay, for B mine, if they cheat, they're either going to get 10 or 25, versus not cheating, they're going to get 5 or 20. Cheating is the best option. So B, cheat. G mine, don't cheat. So that would be letter E as an elephant. G mine's dominant strategy is to not cheat. B mine's dominant strategy is to cheat. We will go ahead and do a treasure hunt question. Let's see, what breakfast food did I have today? I had Frosted Flakes for breakfast. So come tell me that I had Frosted Flakes for breakfast. There wasn't anything better in my house to eat. That is not my favorite cereal.